Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. In the last few Dharma talks we were discussing about noble truth of suffering, dukkha sissa. We approach from the first Buddha's sermon, turning of the wheel of Dharma. In there, the Buddha said, birth is suffering, old age, decay, sickness, and disease is suffering, death is suffering. And also to be with the people of dislike is suffering, and to be parted away from the people that you like is suffering. And then he said, not getting what one wishes is suffering. And then finally he said, the 5 aggregates of clinging is suffering. Altogether 7 parts. And we have discussed quite in detail about these things. But on the last one, the 5 aggregates of clinging, I had explained them exactly what that means. But we haven't expanded into the concept of suffering. Because to understand that, I need to explain types of suffering or dukkha, which we have done. The first one is dukkha dukkha, okay, suffering suffering or obvious suffering. Such thing as sorrow, lamentation, grief, pain, and so on. And second part is viparinama dukkha, which means suffering caused by change. Suffering due to change. And the third one is sankhara dukkha, suffering of mental formation. Only when you understand these 3 types of suffering, you will be able to understand why Buddha said the 5 aggregates of clinging is suffering. In this last one, sankhara dukkha, okay, suffering due to mental formation. So, what is mental formation? Mental formation is something or anything that is caused by other things. Or you can say anything that arises is due to a whole set of conditions or causes. Simply put, cause and effect. Any effect, any result does not arise without cause or conditions. That's it. So whatever is happening is due to a whole set of conditions, and that's what it means by formation. So as we all know, conditions are always changing and changing. So they are not permanent. They are not permanent. Because whenever conditions change, the results change. Whenever conditions change, the results change. The results or effect. Whenever the effects eventually become the cause or the condition, and then the next effect follow. That's how the link goes on and on. And there are so many permutation and variation and combination, it is endless. So in other words, everything is changing. It's in a state of flux. Everything is impermanent. In other words, everything has the beginning and the end. Everything has a beginning and the end. So, in a way, this sankhara dukkha, suffering due to formations, mean suffering due to the beginning and the end, suffering due to the arising and passing away, suffering due to impermanence. That is sankhara dukkha. As such, one must understand what sankhara dukkha is. Anything that arises and passes away is dukkha, suffering. And that one is not easy to see, not easy to understand. The first two is, especially the first one, dukkha, dukkha, obvious suffering, such as birth, decay and death, sorrow, lamentation, grief, pain, and so on, is very obvious. You can understand that quite easily. Second one to changed is suffering. As we have already discussed it, at any moment, at any second, your happiness or peace will end and change into a different mode, which is not peaceful, which is not happy. That is also intellectually and even on a day-to-day basis quite easy to accept. The third one, everything that arises and passes away is suffering, or impermanence is suffering. It's difficult to accept or comprehend because every material objects and every mental object or material process or mental process or the body or the mind or the soul or the spirit, they fall under the mind and matter, and everything arises and passed away. Those two falls under that arising and passing away. So, in other words, everything in the universe, both physical world as well as mental world, arises and passes away, so they are suffering. So based on that point, like sad, angry, unhappy, sorrow, lamentation, grief, disease, sickness, these are suffering. What are these? These are actually unpleasant sensation, physical unpleasant sensation and mental unpleasant sensation. And in here, one need to understand this physical and mental. Sometimes you will hear the word, physical pain, and then mental pain. This pain or sensation, okay, this comes from physical and mental. Which one is right? But actually all sensations are mental. All sensations are mental. The difference is some of the sensation comes from the physical source, and some of the sensations comes from the mental source. So when you hear the word physical, okay, pain, aches, itch, okay, we just literally use physical, but in a stricter sense, all sensations, all Vedana are mental. One should have a clear understanding about it, even though we won't be repeating again and again physical source or physical pain, but actually pain is mental. So these kind of unpleasant sensations are dukkha. Okay, yeah, we agree. In an obvious way, we agree, and also these physical pain and mental pains they arise and they pass away. Nothing is permanent and forever. And now, the difficult part is all these pleasant sensations, okay, happiness, joy, okay, peace, bliss, anything and everything, all the pleasure that we derive from the five sources, eye source, ear source, nose source, tongue source, body source, all the physical pleasure, we all define and group and put it as sukha, comfortable, pleasurable, nice to have, want to have. But the Buddha said that is dukkha, and that is the part it is difficult for us to swallow. But if you look at it, these happiness and joys and all these sense pleasure, beautiful sights and sounds, everything, in reality what? They arises and pass away. They don't last forever. Arises and pass away. Impermanence. They arises and we don't want that to pass away. We really hold on. We really grab hold of it. We fight for it so that it won't disappear. That struggle itself is a suffering. So, under this definition, sankhara dukkha, anything that arises and passing away is dukkha or suffering. So all the pleasure we like, all the bliss we like, all the senses we enjoy, under that definition of arising and passing away is dukkha. Now we begin to understand unpleasant sensations, unpleasant feelings are dukkha, and also all pleasant sensations and all pleasant feelings are also dukkha. They simply arise and pass away. You can't hold on to it. And so is the third kind of sensation, neutral sensation. You are not even aware of it. They also are constantly arising and passing away. So, this suffering due to formation, it covers the unpleasant, it covers the pleasant, it covers the neutral. It covers anything and everything. It covers especially the one we like, we love, and we define as pleasant, blissful, comfortable, want to have, want to live with. It covers that. That one is difficult. Okay, now according to definition, we can accept it. We understand intellectually. But on practical level, on experiential level, it is very difficult for us to accept that all the pleasure we chase, we follow, we work for is suffering. That is the real suffering Buddha is talking about, sankhara dukkha. When he's talking the noble truth of suffering, dukkha sissa. So for this one to understand, you can't intellectually understand. You can't intellectually accept. Intellectually, if you are a deep thinker, you might be able to accept it. But simply on an intellectual level, experiential level, you can't. And that is where this meditation comes in. Okay? Only with meditation you will see, especially the pleasant feelings and sensation that we love so much are suffering. We practice and practice and practice. And even that, you have to practice with a very mindful state, with a guidance within the framework, other than you can shift into it. If you are totally into the jhanic meditation, you can miss that. Jhanic meditation plus intellectual understanding, you think you might be enlightened. But not so. Eventually, one must be mindful moment to moment to moment, and practice in such a way that one is able to see every moment arises and passes away. What are the moments consist of? Moment consists of pleasant sensation, unpleasant sensation, and neutral sensation. That's it. And when you experientially experience it, not just one little stretch of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but you train yourself so that you can see it consistently and constantly. Only then one can say, oh, I understand sankhara dukkha, suffering due to formation is really dukkha. Okay. And we will use the word dukkha because suffering is not enough. The meaning to cover the word dukkha. We have explained that before. And in that way, the real change in the way you see the point of view, samadhi, correct view comes in. And only when the correct view comes in, you will see all things as dukkha, suffering. And when you see that all things are dukkha, suffering, only then your attachment towards those things drop. If not, your attachment towards these pleasant, pleasurable things, you cannot drop. Even with unpleasant, such as anger, things like that, even though we say we hate it, we are somehow attached to it because you can't let go of that anger. You can't forgive a person. Okay? You can't overlook somebody else's error and mistake. In a way, we are attached to negative things as well, unpleasant things as well, and neutral things. We are not even aware that we are attached, but we always shift and drift and float around in the stream of neutral sensation unknowingly. That is called moha. Moha is delusion or illusion. That's how we are, and that is what suffering is. So when we understand that kind of a way, then we understand when Buddha said the 5 aggregates of clinging is suffering. Okay. And what are the 5 aggregates of clinging? First of all is the bodily aggregates or aggregates of matter. These arises and passed away, arises and passed away, constantly, instantly. We even mentioned the Buddha has the capability to see how fast they arise and pass away. More than 1 billion of a second, that is the time span of a material, lifespan of a material. In other words, just to put in general, in 1 second, 1 billion material or matter arises and passes away already. When it is passing away like with that rate, we can't see, we can't feel, so we think it is the same thing. That's how the identity of permanency arises. We don't see it. And as we all know, the mental states arises and passed away faster than the material property. According to the Buddha, 17 times faster. If there is a one material arise and pass away, during that same period, 17 mental states arises and pass away. So that's why the first aggregate is aggregate of matters or bodily aggregates is suffering. They are constantly arising and pass away. And secondly, what is the aggregates? Is called Vedanat Khanda. Vedanat Khanda is aggregates of feelings and sensations. Aggregates of feeling and sensation. And in there too, what is happening? Why does the Buddha say these aggregates are clinging? Here it is. We already have mentioned, discussed, whenever pleasant feeling come in, you cling to it. Even the unpleasant feeling come in, they are so adverse to your psyche, you can't let go, you cling to it. Unpleasant neutral sensation, you don't even know that you are clinging to it. On the bodily aggregate, when you see a beautiful form, cling to it. When you see an ugly form, you cling to the idea of, you don't want to see it. The same thing with sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. These have the power to make you cling, to make you attach, to make you crave for it. So the third group of clinging is Sanya Khanda, aggregates of perception. And perception is the way you remember, the way you recognize, and the way you put into your memory back. Again, likes and dislike, likes and dislike. And how do you remember or cognize these like and dislike? By the marks that you make. They arises and pass away. And we always cling on to and fight for our own perception. The way I see it is right, the way you see it is wrong. There you go. That's number 3. And number 4 is Sankhara Khanda. So, aggregates of mental formation. Aggregates of mental formation, just in a very loose term, all your emotions, good emotions, bad emotions, positive mental state, negative mental state. Altogether, 50 of them, you cling onto it. Okay? You cling onto your joy, you cling onto your happiness, you cling onto your excitement. And also you can't let go of your anger, you can't let go of wanting to revenge or wanting to square it off or wanting to make it fair and just. Under the name of fair, just and righteousness we fight. All produce suffering. Now we understand why the Sankhara Khanda, mental formations, are suffering. Simply these things happen and simply they arises and pass away, arises and pass away. And finally, Vijnana Khanda, aggregates of consciousness. Aggregates of consciousness. These aggregate of consciousness, we already started with that. The material or matter arises and passes away more than 1 billion of seconds. And these consciousness arises and passes away more than the 17 billion of a second. That much, that speed, they arises and pass away. They arises and pass away. They cognize the material, but that kind of a speed we can't comprehend. For us, when we look into that space of time, like eternal, nothing changes. That's why it is difficult for us to accept it. That's why we think everything is permanent, everything is constant, everything is forcible, intrangible, controllable. This is the idea, the concept we arrived. Because of the illusion of permanency. That's why we hold on, we identify with I, me, self, a soul, a being, an individual, a person. We consolidate and identify with it. But simply these are all concepts. But through our own experience, we cannot say that is arising and pass away. Every day, every second, we are always trying to control the way we want. And as soon as a sense of controls come in, that is a sense of I, that's a sense of ego. But simply, it is the concept that we build for ourselves based on the way we like it. But when you practice Satipatthana Vipassana, you come to understand everything is arising and passing away, arising and passing away. All the joys and happiness and pleasures and sense pleasure that we hold so dearly arises and passes away. Not from a book, not from a lecture, but through your own meditative experience. Only then you will come to accept everything in the universe is arising and passing away. That's why everything in the universe is dukkha, suffering. That's the way we would understand and we would accept. So, this statement, the 5 aggregates of clinging is suffering, is not very obvious. On an intellectual level, you can say it's a philosophical understanding of dukkha, philosophical understanding of suffering. And to convert that philosophical into the actual understanding can be done only through direct experience. There is no thought process, there is no reflectiveness, there is no philosophy, there is no thinking or deep thinking can make you understand that. Only the experiential understanding can make you understand that is dukkha, that is suffering. So, the first noble truth, dukkha sassa, the noble truth of suffering, that's why the Buddha said, must be thoroughly understood, intellectually as well as experientially, must be thoroughly understood. Without understanding that is dukkha, without understanding all the pleasure that we hold so dearly in our life is dukkha, we would never surrender those things. We would never give up those things. On the contrary, we'll fight for it. We'll will try our best to hold onto those things. That is the noble truth of suffering. And this, when suffering come in, you will notice the first parts of what Buddha said suffering is. Okay. Birth is suffering. Okay. Decay or old age is suffering. And death is suffering. He put it that way. Why does he put it that way? Just at the opening line. Okay, we have already approached one point of view to explain that. And today we'll approach in a different way. Okay. Of course, all these happened when Buddha, before he became a Buddha, he was a prince. Prince Siddhartha Gautama, his name is Siddhartha is the first name, Gautama is the last name. Siddhartha Gautama. His father wants him to become an emperor. Of course, in the olden days, especially rich and wealthy and powerful, they can afford the greatest fortune tellers. Okay, I again put loosely. And 7 great fortune tellers came and when his son was born. And they predict, 7 of them predicted, he will become an emperor of the world or he will become a Buddha. And only one person said no, he will become a Buddha. But regardless, as soon as the father heard about it, he wanted his son to become an emperor. So he tried to keep everything, every sound, every sight, every smell away from his son so that he would become bored with this, what we call pleasurable life, and renounce the world and become an ascetic or a hermit. So he keeps totally away from these things as much as wealth and power could allow him. So the prince was totally ignorant about all this suffering, the obvious suffering. But one day on his way to a garden, he saw first of all, an old man bending over, hunching over, walking one step at a time with a stick. And he saw there people with disease and sickness. And he saw a corpse, a dead person. And he also saw a hermit. And of course, each time he has to ask, because he wasn't quite aware of it. He has to ask, what is this, what is this, what is this? And the hermit, he's trying to find peace, okay, so that it will be away from all these suffering, which is old age, sickness, and death. And especially as his whole life was being sheltered from these kind of negative sights and sounds and smell, it has a stronger and higher impact on him, and he contemplates. And he doesn't want to get old, he doesn't want to get sick, he doesn't want to die. That's enormous desire come in. So his first thing is, I want to escape from death. I want to escape from old age, sickness, and death. That is his attitude. And for that, I have to renounce everything and go as an ascetic, as a hermit to find. And he left. So the objective is to escape from the suffering of old age, sickness, and death. And he went. And eventually he found it. He found a way not to die. He found a way not to get old. He found a way not to get sick. He found that way, and he turned around and he taught to the human race for 45 years. And that, nowadays, we call it Buddhism. But there's no God, nothing but a prince who discovered this method, not to die, not to get old, and not to get sick. That's Buddhism, to escape from the suffering of old age, sickness, and death. So in a very superficial level, that's where it all starts, and that's how it happened. And he actually, so to speak, in one word, he conquered death. The Buddha conquered death. Now, one needs to understand what it really means by conquering death. Okay? You have to know, when the Buddha taught us, he said, birth is death. Old age, sickness, and diseases. Oh, birth is suffering, old age, sickness, and disease is suffering, death is suffering. He started with the birth. Why he started with the birth is death. You will not die if you are not born. You will only die if you are born. You will not grow old, you will not have decay, sickness, if you are not born. So the birth is the base, the foundation of old age, sickness, and death. That's why he put it in that order. So when he said he conquered death and old age and disease, some people, if you don't look at quite deeply, think that, oh, I will never die, I'm immortal, I'm indestructible. My form will never change, I will always look the same thing. Most of the people perceive that way, conquering sickness and death. But if you look at it deeply, the Buddha's teaching, death exists because of the birth. Old age, decay exists because of the birth. So if you want to conquer old age, sickness, and death, you must not be born. That's how Buddha approached of conquering old age and death. That you must not be born, because birth is the seed, the foundation, or in other words, birth is the arising, and the remaining are the passing away. All things arises and passed away. If it doesn't arise, there is no passing away. If you are not born, you will not die. That way one must understand the Buddha has conquered death. Or this is the way Buddha showed us how to conquer suffering, old age, sickness, and death. One must not be born. Okay. Of course, birth is the seed of all these suffering. Birth itself is suffering. Suffering causes suffering. Escalating. So if you don't want to be born, now you have to find a reason. Okay, what is birth? Birth is suffering. Birth is the seed of suffering. Birth is the seed of old age, sickness, and death. So we have to eliminate the origin. We have to eliminate the cause. The cause is birth. Now if you want to eliminate the cause, the birth, we have to find what is the cause of that birth. You have to put birth as an effect, result. What causes this birth? Of course, in one word, samudaya sissa, craving is the cause, becoming is the effect. Craving is the cause, birth is the effect. That craving is the second noble truth, which we will deal later in details. So in here, that's why Buddha started his sermon with birth is suffering, decay or old age is suffering, death is suffering. These are all in the physical, and the mental state is sorrow, lamentation, pain, and grief is suffering. And then, and so on and so on. Altogether 7 different groups, the Buddha put it. That's why he put it one in an obvious way, but one thing is he wants us to understand that these suffering are caused by birth, the origin. And if you do not reborn, if have no birth, if there's no becoming, there will be no old age, sickness, and death. So we have to tackle not to be reborn. Not to be reborn, what is the cause of this birth or becoming? You have to tackle or attack the cause, eliminate the cause. If you can eliminate the cause, then there will be no birth, there will be no becoming. When there's no becoming, there's no old age, sickness, and death. That is the approach, and that's why Buddha put it right on set. He taught us in many ways. A layman could understand and practice and get attainment. Intellectual can practice and then get an attainment, because you cannot talk the layman examples and scenarios and program to the intellectual, because they think it's very boring, a child. So the Buddha has to taught different people in a different way based on the mental capacity. But as long as you have an average level of intelligence, you can achieve attainment or enlightenment. So that is the Noble Truth of Suffering. We are talking it for about 3 weeks now about this, the first Noble Truth. So let's see it in a very clear-cut term, okay, without expanding too much. And what is suffering? What is dukkha? Okay? What is suffering? One is dukkha, is anything associated with affliction. Anything that produces affliction is dukkha, or suffering. In one word, what is suffering? Affliction is suffering. Very precise, very correct, right on the button. You can pick it up anything and see whether there's any affliction. If there's affliction, that is dukkha, that is suffering. And what does dukkha do? What does dukkha do? Dukkha, or suffering, its job is to burn people, to burn living beings. Okay, all these noble truths apply directly to the world of living beings, not to the physical world, not the planet, not the sun, not the star, but to living beings. So, what is dukkha? Affliction is dukkha. And what does this dukkha do? The dukkha burns a living being. That's it, simply. So we can understand very clearly when something got burned, what kind of consequences can you see, can you feel, can you sense? That's it. Affliction is suffering. Suffering burns a living being. But how does suffering show up to the universe? How can we see in its manifested form? Okay, affliction. Okay, we can't really, we understand, but we cannot really pinpoint and poke and touch. Burning, we can't pinpoint, poke and touch, but still we understand. So suffering has to manifest itself into this, the world of living beings. that we can really poke and touch and understand. In other words, how does suffering manifest? It manifests as becoming. In other words, it manifests as birth. That is the precise word of the Buddha regard to the word dukkha. Affliction is suffering. It burns you and it manifests into the world of beings as becoming. In other words, birth, the beginning. As long as there's the birth, as long as there's a beginning, as long as there's the becoming, there will be suffering. So the birth is the manifestation of suffering. And if you understand that way, you don't have to think too much. If you understand that deeply, you can steer away from suffering. The Buddha's taught in such a way in Abhidharma, affliction, burning, and becoming as the way to know, understand, and correlate. Abhidharma is a part of the teaching where Buddha taught everything on an impersonal basis. So that will be fairly sufficient to understand what is the first noble truth of suffering, the first noble truth of the Four Noble Truths, which is the noble truth of suffering, dukkha sassa. May all of you be able to thoroughly understand, both theoretically and experientially, the true nature of dukkha, suffering, and may you be able to wanting to release yourself from the bondage of suffering as soon as possible. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Buddham bhajami, Dhammam bhajami, Sangham bhajami,